In 1950, the world's population of 2.5 billion people produced just over 1.5 million tons of plastic. Today, with a global population of more than 7 billion people, we produce over 320 million tons of plastic. And it's estimated that this number is set to double by the year 2034. And every single day, approximately 8 million pieces of plastic pollution finds its way into our oceans. 8 million pieces every single day. My guest today is doing her part to impact this issue in a big way. Welcome to Business with Purpose. I am your host, Molly Stillman of Still Being Molly, and this show is all about bringing you the stories behind the brands, companies, and small businesses that are changing the world. Each week, I interview an entrepreneur, CEO, nonprofit director, or just an incredible person who's trying to make a positive impact not only through their personal life, but also with their career. My goal is to show you that no matter what you do for a living, you can make an impact right where you are. My guest this week is Sarah Rhodes, the founder of Plastic Free Cambodia. Sarah has worked in the hospitality and tourism industry throughout her career, and she has a master's in tourism management, where she actually developed a keen interest in sustainable tourism. After 4 years working for the South Australian Tourism in online marketing management and project management roles, she undertook training via the Climate Leadership Corps led by Al Gore, former Vice President of the United States. After completing this training, Sarah moved to Siem Reap, Cambodia, where she worked primarily with the NGO sector and responsible tourism practices, during which time Plastic Free Cambodia was formed. This was such an incredible conversation. Sarah is so knowledgeable, and she really challenged me to think about maybe even doing a plastic-free July myself. You're going to learn so much from this conversation with Sarah. So without further ado, on to my chat with Sarah Rhodes. Sarah, talking to you is already a very stark reminder of why I am so grateful for technology, because we are literally on opposite sides of the world right now. And it's just so cool what technology can do to connect people who are thousands and thousands of miles away. So, because you're talking to us from Cambodia right now.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, I'm in Siem Reap, so right near Angkor Wat.
Now, if for people who are not familiar with the geography of Cambodia, where exactly is that in the country?
Cambodia is in Southeast Asia, sort of nestled up next to Vietnam. Mm-hmm. And Siem Reap is kind of in the middle north of the country. Quite near this quite remarkable lake called the Tonle Sap Lake, which is just a phenomenal biosphere of awesome bird life and wildlife, and 7 k's south of Angkor Wat temples, which a lot of people know about the Angkor temples. They're quite famous.
Yeah. Well, that is just amazing. And how long have you been living there?
4.5 years.
Wow. And do you just absolutely love it?
I do. I mean, it definitely has its moments. It's not like Australia at all.
Yeah. Toto, we're not in Kansas anymore.
Yeah, exactly. But it's definitely got some magical moments. I mean, just before I came home tonight, I was able to go to the local market and buy amazing handmade fresh noodles for 25 cents.
Oh, wow. That is just a little bit more affordable than the pasta that I buy at my grocery store. So
maybe a smidge.
Just a smidge.
So stuff like that just is oh wow, so lucky.
Yeah, that's so cool. Well, Sarah, I want you to we're going to dive right in and have you give us the Sarah 101. So tell us who you are and how you got to living in Cambodia and how you got started with Plastic Free Cambodia.
Mm-hmm. Right. Well, I'll try and keep it to the succinct version.
No, it's okay.
So I'm from Adelaide in South Australia. And from as young as I can remember, I always wanted to work in tourism, be involved in the tourism industry, travel, do all of these things. And it was when I went back to university a second time round to do a postgrad that I really got my hooks into sustainable tourism or sustainability in tourism. Mm-hmm. Of course, life doesn't always go the way we think it's going to go. And I was still working in tourism, but I went down a slightly different path. And I was working in digital marketing, which was super fun. And I learned some amazing skills. And it was all about promoting tourism in different destinations, which was phenomenal. But around 2012, I sort of had this moment where I was like, oh, hang on. Like, this is fun and all, but this isn't what my dream was. So I started to work at getting my dream back on track, which was, more of like sustainability or ecotourism. And after a fairly hefty attempt to get something along those lines in Australia, I decided to broaden my search to Southeast Asia. Thinking, it's quite close to Australia. It's actually not as close as it might seem, but also that it's quite an emerging tourism market. And I thought, well, if tourism's quite, relatively new there compared to many other places, there could be some really good opportunities to get some, sustainable development stuff happening before tourism really takes a stronghold. I still like to hope that might be possible. Anyway. My search took me through Thailand and Cambodia, and I was looking at some things and contacts in Laos as well. But when I came to Cambodia, I met a guy that is running an NGO, a very small one. It's still just like him and I think about 2-3 staff. He's from England, but he's been in Cambodia, I think, close to 20 years now. And when I met him running his little NGO, which is called CONCERT, and it's an acronym for Connecting Communities, Environment and Responsible Tourism. And I just thought, wow, okay, that ticks all the boxes. And we sat down and we had a coffee and a chat. And he just left such a strong impact on me. And I thought, I really need to spend some time learning from this guy. So I went back to Australia, sorted out my affairs and packed up and moved over to Cambodia in late 2014. And it was while I was working with him that, I started to get a feel for the community here. It's a really amazing community, very, very familiar, even though it's quite a bustling little town, everyone sort of knows everyone and you get some connections happening quite quickly. And one of the things I noticed was that there's a lot of plastic pollution on the ground. Mm-hmm. And so then starting to get a feel in the community who's doing something in the environment space and what's going on. And there really was not a lot really happening on the ground in terms of that at that time. And just before I'd left Australia, I'd partaken in this challenge called Plastic Free July that was started by an amazing lady named Rebecca in Western Australia, Perth. And just from my own experience doing that challenge, I realized, okay, oh my gosh, we use so much single-use plastic in our daily lives, and there's something we can do to minimize that if we just put a little bit of thought into it. And I thought, well, that really impacted me in the way I think. Why not run that challenge here in Siem Reap and see what the community thinks here and see what sort of an effect it can have. So I ran that challenge in 2015. Really, I would say everything with PFC in the early days was kind of making it up as I went along, because I had this great job that I was really enjoying, and this project was a little bit of a side gig. However, the universe had other ideas, and obviously it's now no longer a side gig. But in those early days, it started with this really phenomenal training restaurant called Haven contacting me and saying, we love what you did with the challenge, and we really want you to come and speak to our staff and our trainees and explain why plastic pollution is something that we should be so worried about. So ran that first workshop. It was really sort of, put some slides together, took some butcher's paper along and some crayons, I think it was, and they had one of their staff translating for me into Khmer language. And it's just evolved from there. And so probably around 18 months ago, I took the leap and I went out completely by myself to work 100% of the time on Plastic Free Cambodia. And we still run regular workshops. I've got a young Khmer guy here who runs monthly workshops in the local language, and I do a sort of heftier workshops, like half day, full day, or like consulting programs with businesses that want to get rid of plastic out of their operations, as well as like I'm now developing some online programs and all sorts of things as well, which is super exciting. And so yeah, that's kind of where we're at today, and it's going to be the 5th Plastic Free July Challenge this year, which is really exciting and a little bit unbelievable. I've just like got so much exciting stuff going on, and I don't know, it's so much to look forward to.
Yeah, I would think that 5 years into Plastic Free July, you've learned a little bit along the way, and what that looks like in a country like Cambodia versus a country like Australia or the United States, or even a country in the UK, or in Europe. What have you learned in that 5 years? Because I can only imagine, like you said, how you were kind of really just figuring it out as you went when you started. And I mean, I have not personally been to Cambodia, but I have been to developing nations, and the plastic problem in developing nations in general is overrun, and it's an issue that a lot of times they don't have the infrastructure to deal with. They don't have the resources in place to implement recycling. They don't have those kind of basic things that we might have in the first world to be able to do those things. So what kind of baby steps did you take in those first few years? Yeah,
well, I really so much to fill in on what you've just said, because you're so completely right. It's so different. So like a big part of it has been going through the steps and learning how to do it myself. Because if I know how to do it, then I can show other people how to do it. And so I really remember in the very early days, my first forays in learning Khmer language were how to say I don't want a plastic bag and how I don't want a plastic straw, things like that, and just being able to interact with people at the market and local cafes and things. And of course, how people responded to that and how I dealt with that has fed into how I'm then able to work that into workshops, so that it equips other people with techniques. It's sort of funny sometimes when people are a little bit astounded, like, how do I do that? It's like, well, you've got the advantage that you speak the local language.
Yeah.
So step one. So like even in Australia, I would say to people, just, have a conversation, use your words to describe what you want. And when people understand where you're coming from, then they're going to be like more than happy to oblige most of the time. So, yeah.
Yeah. Now for people who, I mean, because especially I'm assuming in the community that you're in, that it's just become like second nature, like you said, to kind of just use that plastic bag and grab that plastic straw, and it's just everywhere. I mean, we've talked about this on the show before, but I think the conversation is important, because I always like to say, like, look, to my friends, I'm like, look, I'm not like this, super, like tree hugging hippie, even though that's okay. Like, but I, even in my own places, like, or in my own home, I've tried to do little things like no longer use plastic wrap. Like I got the beeswax wrap, and
which is so much nicer.
Yes. And using reusable grocery bags, and just I even got like the mesh bags for my produce, and there's things like that. So just trying to find ways to eliminate plastic wherever I can. But it is difficult when you live in a society and in a culture that just has plastic everywhere. So in a community like this, how did you begin to even educate them on why this is important? Because I know that it's just that's a battle in and of itself.
It is, in that I'm kind of starting from square one. And it isn't in that, like, so much gratitude to the Cambodian people.
Yeah.
They love to learn.
Yeah.
And, I'm lost for words. Like, it's like every workshop, something will happen where I'm just so inspired. by them and how they've responded and what they've come up with or what they already do.
Yeah.
That's the bit, like a lot of people say, how do you keep doing this? Like, it's brutal. And I'm like, it can be brutal, but I keep doing it because the response I get is just so inspiring. And it's like, okay, well, I need to keep going.
It reminds me of a obviously different country, but there is a book that my daughter loves, and it's a children's book called One Plastic Bag, and it is about the women of Gambia. And one woman in particular, and I'm probably going to say her name incorrectly, but I believe it's Isatau Cisse is her name. And it's a true story of this woman in Gambia who was every day when she would be walking around her city, she would see, just plastic everywhere and these plastic bags everywhere. And what began to happen were the goats and the sheep in their community, it's a big farming community, began to eat them. And then the plastic bags would wrap around the intestines of the livestock and they would die. And so in a community that was so dependent upon agriculture and farming and these animals, it was beginning to really affect it was affecting their community a lot. And so what she started to do was she would collect the plastic bags she would see on her walk home, and she started to basically knit with them and create like handbags and purses and zipper pouches and all these kinds of things made out of these plastic bags she would find on the way home. And pretty soon she began to bring in other women from the community to do this work with her, and they began to sell them. And pretty soon the entire community was free of plastic bags. And it's a really cool story. I mean, it's a true story, and my daughter loves it, but it's given us the opportunity to talk about these issues on her level. I mean, she's only 5, but it's, talked about the importance of, so now, like, my daughter is the one that is, when we go to the grocery store, she's like, Mom, don't forget your bags for the groceries. Yeah. And so she knows, and so, like, little conversations like that are important. But what that story also reminds me of, just in hearing from you, is just the resourcefulness of people. Yes. And when you begin to just give them the education, you don't need to do it for them. Like, they'll do the work themselves, and they will come up with the creative ways to implement the changes and things like that. And so I don't know, it just, as we were talking, I just was like, oh man, it reminds me of that book I read to Lily all the time.
Oh, for sure. I can totally relate to so much of what you're saying. And I think we are still sort of at the beginning of the curve. More and more people are starting to understand it. I'm not sure if we're quite at that. I mean, like, there's some like youth programs in the capital city, Phnom Penh. There's a lot of youth programs there that encourage innovation, especially around environmental stuff, which is really amazing to see. That's sort of, really just in the early stages. Definitely can see how, like, so many parallels with that story that you've just told. And Cambodia is also a very agriculture reliant country. As you know, I can see a lot of commonalities throughout the region, and the more I speak to people from around the world, actually a lot of commonalities in all parts of the developing world. Just from the sheer nature, like, I think, and this like comes back to my background in tourism, is that tourism has had a big impact on that, because countries have seen the opportunity to promote tourism as another income source, and with that has come, we need to be modern, and we need to be hygienic, and we need to be able to show that, and then they've adopted that into their own lifestyles as well, and sadly a lot of that has to do with plastic. So that's, I think, a big part of where it's come from. But it's really great to see now that there's trying to think about solutions. I do just want to loop back to what you said earlier about trying to tackle this in a country that's different to like where I grew up, or Western countries that have a lot of infrastructure. So 2 parts on that, like, from a personal level, because of the lack of infrastructure, or I don't even know if I want to say lack. what happens is a lot more organized. It's a lot smaller scale, but it's a lot more effective. So the very few things that can be recycled here are recycled, and not because of environmental protection, but because of money.
Yeah.
So no, there's no big scale recycling happening in Cambodia at the moment. There are a few pretty awesome small projects and, some in the pipeline. But the recyclables get transported out of Cambodia into neighboring countries like Malaysia and Thailand for the actual recycling. But because there's money along the chain, that happens quite effectively. But what it does mean is, from an individual perspective, it's like, okay, so what am I going to buy and how am I going to buy it? And there's local markets at a stone's throw everywhere, where if you get in with your produce, reusable produce bags and your tote bags and those kind of things, you can avoid all of the plastic in those marketplaces. I mean, even to the point where my local market, I can take a jar, I get some funny looks, but I can take a jar and get freshly made coconut milk into my jar. So because a lot of stuff is sort of just done and packaged up on the spot, it's not pre-packaged like it is in supermarkets. Unfortunately, we do have a lot of modern supermarkets here now, which has gone from, I think, 2 when I moved here to I've lost count now. Unfortunately, they do a lot of pre-packaging, but in the local markets, it's not a problem. So as an individual, I find that it's often easier than I would find it if I was back in Australia.
Yeah.
The other thing, which is interesting, because like the countries that you mentioned, UK, America, Australia, and in parts of Europe, a lot of these countries have been and are still exporting their plastic recyclables over to Asia, where, as you quite rightly pointed out, the infrastructure just isn't the same. So, this is where I see a lot of parallels, and I feel like I'm in quite a special position to be able to see both sides of that fence, how it's affecting life here, and and where it's come from.
Okay, I'm just going to take a quick break from this incredible conversation with Sarah, and I wanted to take a moment to thank our sponsor of the show, who helps to make it possible, and that is the Happiness Planner, one of my favorite brands. They design the most beautiful, inspirational planners, journals, and notepads. I personally love the Happiness Planner. It helps to keep me on track and find joys each and every day. They also have gorgeous journals that focus on different themes such as confidence, gratitude, growth mindset, and purpose. These are great tools to help you become more self-aware, happier, and feel more fulfilled. And for those of you who like to use apps, which I know I do, the Happiness Planner is also available via mobile and web app. Now, how is it different from other calendar and to-do list apps out there? Well, on top of schedule and to-do lists, it comes with functions like monthly goal setting and reflections, meals and exercise recording, gratitude journaling, happiness, health, energy level tracker, and daily inspirational quotes and articles. You can check out their web app at thehappinessplanner.io or download the mobile app from the App Store or Google Play. And you can download free printables on their website at thehappinessplanner.com. And you can use the coupon code LIVEWITHPURPOSE for 10% off your purchase. Now, back to my chat with Sarah. Now, when you first started, because you've been living in Cambodia for, you said 4.5 years, when you first started, what are some of the things that you encountered then, or just, as you were starting out and figuring things out as you went, but what looks different now than when you started 4.5 years ago?
The awareness is so much greater now. I remember speaking with, extremely educated people about how burning plastic on the side of the road is really dangerous for health, and having them look at me like I had 2 heads, to now having conversations around, we know what Plastic Free Cambodia is, and we know what the Plastic Free July Challenge is, and we know it's bad for our health and it's bad for the environment. And so that conversation has just shifted miles, which is amazing. Now we have, more opportunity to work in the behavior change area.
Yeah, absolutely. So as we are about to enter the 5th anniversary, or the 5th annual, I guess I should say, Plastic Free July. What is your goal going into this one? And do you have a different goal each year? Do you just kind of pray or hope for incremental growth over the years?
Yeah, a bit of both. Definitely a lot of the latter. No, but this year I really do have a goal, and this year is really about making a stronger impact throughout the region. So last year I was fortunate enough to work with some clients in neighboring countries, in Laos and in Myanmar, which was just phenomenal. It seems like there is a lot of interest in making some changes in the nearby countries as well. And I often get asked, "Oh, we need you in Thailand. When are you going to come here?" So this year is really about launching, programs that can be accessible in other parts of the region as well, because the information is so relevant and relatable across the whole continent, really.
That's really exciting. I remember when I first was introduced to you and heard about the work you were doing, I just thought it was so unique and I mean that in like this is something that is so needed. And so to see somebody who has the passion for it and the drive for it, and it's interesting how you kind of came from this world of tourism and had this passion for travel and then sustainable tourism, which, man, we could do an entire podcast on that.
Yeah.
But to come from that and then to really kind of discover something that you really cared about and you wanted to do something about it along the way it's really inspiring to me, because I love when I see people kind of find their way on a unique path and then they just hyper focus on it. And it's just something like, you know what, here's this issue, or here's this particular problem, or here's this topic that I am just going to drive home, and I'm going to do it until, something or someone tells me that I'm supposed to stop. So what is on the horizon for you personally for, kind of the immediate future and kind of, even, 5-10 years down the road? What do you kind of see for yourself?
Well, immediately I'm planning to spend some time in other countries. The next 2 trips planned are to Bali and to Cebu in the Philippines. The latter is for a conference, but I'm hoping that, I might be able to reach out to some businesses while I'm there as well. So to physically sort of back up what I'm trying to do online in terms of expanding the reach and the messaging. Wow. And then in the long term, I kind of see myself spending some more time back in Australia.
Yeah.
There's some things I miss, but I feel like I could make a life that's quite balanced in between the two continents.
Yeah. I can only imagine. I mean, I know that it's got to be hard to be so far away from home, and like while you love, parts of Cambodia, it's also it's not home in a lot of aspects. So I know that that's probably something that you must miss.
Yeah, it is a bit. Yeah, having had something that I've spent most of my life in Australia. This has been phenomenal. I definitely really didn't expect when I left that I was still going to be here, like 4.5 years later. But that's a wonderful surprise. And there's definitely parts of Cambodia that are like just so incredible. But yeah, I feel like a little bit of balance between the two would be lovely.
Yes. Now, okay, then this is my last question before we get to the our just kind of fun get to know you round. So when somebody is looking to go plastic free or take part in a Plastic Free July type challenge, obviously the easy things off the top of our heads to eliminate are things like plastic grocery bags and straws, things like that. What are some of the more difficult things you have found to go plastic free on, and what would maybe be your tip for those to tackle that particular thing?
For me, okay, so every So this will be the 5th Plastic Free July in Cambodia, but it will be my 6th one personally.
Mm-hmm.
And every year I pick one of these slightly trickier things to tackle and work on. And I have to say, like, even for me, probably the hardest one has been around milk. So I've stopped drinking dairy milk, but regardless whether it's dairy milk or nut milk or whatever, there's not much that comes in sustainable packaging. I mean, there is a resurgence of milk being bottled in glass in the UK. And there was one organic farm where I was actually living in Sydney before I came over here, where I was able to buy milk in glass bottles. Unfortunately, that particular one couldn't send the glass back, so I ended up just using them for storing rice and grains and flour and stuff in. So I mean that's interesting, because certainly a lot of the milk we get here is in Tetra Paks, which are like almost impossible to recycle. No one wants to spend time splitting the layers of materials apart to recycle them. And a lot of the milk in the West is in plastic containers. So yeah, that's a tricky one. So I've been experimenting with all different kinds of milk. Soy milk has probably been the easiest one to make. But then I've always been like, okay, there's all this like soy pulp that's got a proper name, but I don't know what the name is. What to do with all of that, which feels a little bit wasteful sometimes.
Yeah.
I've had a go at oat milk. I haven't mastered the formula yet. The few batches I've made have tasted pretty rank. Yeah, and then there's other things. I mean, like I know that around the sort of zero waste circles and whatever, almond milk's really popular, but almonds are super expensive here. So, so it's just one of those things I keep experimenting on. So that's been one that's been a little bit more of a challenge, maybe on an easier level, and something that people might not even think about. Is one of my future goals is going to be quitting sugar, but we're not there yet. So one of my guilty pleasures is I do like to have sugar in my cup of tea or coffee.
Yeah.
And going out to cafes, often it's in a paper tube or a paper packet.
Yeah.
And I'm not sure. It's been a while, but here, often that paper has also got like a thin plastic lining as well to protect it from the humidity. So I've started just like taking my own little jar of sugar around with me. So that's how I've solved that one. I mean, like, that one's really easy. It's just a matter of like remembering to top up the jar. It's one of those tiny little jam jars that you get with, I don't know, scones and stuff, or at B&B's. So I thought I couldn't really leave it on the milk. That was a bit tricky. So I'll throw in an easy one as well.
No, that's smart. I like that idea of just something that's something even, somebody here who, I mean, I'm not a coffee drinker, but somebody who is a coffee drinker might, carry around, those little, like, I don't know what the cream comes in. Those little plastic tubs or something like that. I don't know. Yeah, I mean.
Yeah, absolutely. Anything like that. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, those are really good tips. I appreciate that, Sarah.
You're welcome.
All right. Well, so now this is the part of the show where we transition just a little bit to ask some fun, get to know you questions before we go. And as my listeners know, this is also the portion of the show that my husband inserts some type of sound effect or movie clip to transition us. And we never know what it's going to be. So, Sarah, are you ready?
Yeah.
Planet will be here and we'll be long gone. Just another failed mutation. Just another closed-end biological mistake. An evolutionary cul-de-sac. The planet will shake us off like a bad case of fleas. You want to know how the planet's doing? Ask those people at Pompeii who are frozen into position from volcanic ash how the planet's doing. Want to know if the planet's all right? Ask those people in Mexico City or Armenia or 100 other places buried under thousands of tons of earthquake rubble if they feel like a threat to the planet this week. How about those people in Kilauea, Hawaii, who build their homes right next to an active volcano and then wonder why they have lava in the living room?
Okay, so the first question is, what fictional place would you most like to go to?
Oh my goodness. Oh, it's really hard, Molly. Um, wow, like maybe I don't even know the proper names of these things. You might have to bear with me. But where did the Little Mermaid live? I wouldn't mind living where the Little Mermaid lived.
Oh yeah, like in the I don't know, I don't even know if there was a name, but like her little cave with all of her trinkets and
Yeah, something like that, but like pre-plastic, of course.
yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
exactly. That's perfect. I love it. When I was a kid, I used to pretend I was Ariel every time I went to the pool, and I would like try and dive out of the water like a mermaid. It probably looked way less graceful than I thought it did in my mind.
Sure. Doesn't matter. Your memory is all that counts.
Exactly. Okay. What skill do you not necessarily have, but you would like to master? Is there a particular skill you'd like to learn or master?
Actually, just being able to sit cross-legged for more than 15 minutes. It doesn't seem to matter. Like I used to, do a lot of yoga, and I've dabbled with meditation, and my legs just go numb, and it's difficult.
Well, it's funny because I had a meeting on Monday night, and we were sitting on the floor in a circle, and I was sitting cross-legged, and after 10 minutes, I was like, I am too old to do this. Like, I can't sit crisscross applesauce anymore. Like my back started to hurt, my knees were hurt, my feet were falling asleep. I was like, what is wrong with me?
Yeah. I'm not sure. Like, I mean, there's a lot of people that say you just have to practice, but I've had a lot of goes at it.
Okay. So the next question is, what takes up just far too much of your time other than trying to make milk?
Far more time than that. I need to spend less time on social media. It's so I pass it off as work related, and I'm sure that that's not 100%. But I do pass it off as work related. I'm like, I'm just looking for that post that I saw 3 years ago so that I can share it because it's relevant now. Yeah, I need to get a little bit more efficient with that.
Yeah, I took Facebook off of my phone this year, and that has helped so much. I wish Instagram had a desktop platform that was actually usable,
right?
Because I would totally delete it off my phone because I do need it for work-related stuff. But I'm like, man, I wish I could delete it like I can Facebook.
Absolutely. No, so I actually I have two phones here because I'm so cool. No, it's just kind of how things roll here. And the other one is a super simple Nokia with no internet. It's got the two-tone colored screen.
Yeah.
And I would love for that just to be my phone. But Instagram,
yeah,
I don't know if I would cope without Instagram.
It's so hard. I completely understand. And then the last question is, what is something, actually, this is our second to last question. I'm sorry. What is something that you think everyone should do at least once in their lives?
So this is a little bit biased, but I think that everyone should see Angkor. Angkor Wat is probably the most famous temple that people go to, but some of the less famous per se ones are just magical. There is seriously something about this place, and I think that everyone should have a chance to feel that magic.
Yeah, the pictures that I have seen are just absolutely beautiful, and that is for sure a bucket list thing for me, is to go visit that, because they're beautiful. I mean, I feel like every time I see pictures of it, they're just, they're on these massive like screensavers, screensavers on your computer, or your like Apple TV or something like that. But they're so beautiful. So, and they're just I can only imagine that they are even more beautiful and incredible to see in person.
They are absolutely. And so when you do come, let me know, because, I'll show you around.
Yes, absolutely. Okay. And then my last question, Sarah, and this is the one that I ask all my guests, and that is, what are you most grateful for today?
I have to be a little bit general, because there have been a lot of amazing people in my day, yourself one of them, but everybody that I interacted with today has made me feel really grateful to be here.
I love that. That is really, yeah, when you take a moment to just think about the people that you get to talk with or interact with in some way during the day, it just is such a reminder of how cool life can be and how awesome life can be. And life is better when you do it in community, and you're taking time to put down your phone and look up and have conversations with people, and even when we're halfway across the world. So
even halfway across, especially halfway across
the world. Well, Sarah, thank you so much. This has been just such a joy and a pleasure to hear your story and hear about everything you're doing with Plastic Free Cambodia. I think it's absolutely incredible, and I can't wait to continue to see how you grow it and how it continues to impact the people there, and hopefully in Bali and the Philippines and other countries that you get to connect with. That would be amazing. So thank you so much.
Yeah. Oh, thank you too. Thank you. This has been just so delightful. It's been really great talking with you, and thank you so much for having me on the show.
I would love to know what you loved about this episode, or maybe something that you learned. And I am actually challenging you to consider taking part in Plastic Free July or some version of it. Now, if you do, let me know on social media. You can find me at Still Being Molly or at Business with Purpose Podcast on Instagram or Facebook. And don't forget that hashtag Business with Purpose Podcast. And another huge thank you to our sponsor, The Happiness Planner. Visit thehappinessplanner.com with the code Live with Purpose for 10% off. Thank you so much for listening to this week's episode. If you're a first-time listener, welcome. Be sure to visit our archives for so many incredible past shows featuring amazing entrepreneurs who are literally changing the world with their businesses. And if you are a regular listener, thank you for your support and for tuning in and week out. Be sure to head on over to iTunes, Spotify, Google Play, or wherever you listen to podcasts, and make sure you are subscribed. By clicking that button, that helps to make sure you never miss a new episode of the podcast. And while you're there, would you mind taking a moment to leave a review of the show? Leaving a review of the show helps me to know what you're liking and how the show is personally impacting you. This show is edited by my amazing husband and executive producer, John Stillman, with support from Kelly Dalton, and the music is by Mark Killian of Third Wheel Media. Thank you so much for listening, and go do something good with purpose on purpose.